One day in 1927, 12-year-old Beaton was hanging out with his brother and 4-year-old neighbor's boy. Then Beaton went home alone to get a bat and glove to teach his younger mates how to play baseball.
Wait a minute, I will bring it soon.
And when Beaton came out a few moments later, the boys were all gone.
Billy, where are you? Dennis, come out.
At the sound of Beaton's yelling, his younger brother Billy, who was hiding on the roof of a neighbor's house, answered with a whimper.
Beaton, someone took Dennis.
Who took him?
Boo, the Boogieman.
A year later, Edward Bird, an 18-year-old young man from a rural village, posted a job advertisement in the local newspaper for a part-time farm job. And after a few days, an old man came to Edward's house.
I am Frank Howard. I'll pick up Edward 6 days later.
And 7 days later, the old man named Frank returned and was served a light meal and chatted with Bird family. Frank treated Edward's 10-year-old sister Grace like his own granddaughter, and she thought of him as a kind old man.
My sister who lives next door has a birthday party today, so I'd like to go there with Grace. There are many children at the place, and when I'm back, I'll bring Edward home with me.
Whoa, that would be fun. I want to go too.
Grace's mother didn't like it, but she couldn't object too much, and her husband readily agreed, and Grace herself was eager to go. So Grace followed a kind-hearted old man named Howard and never returned to her family. Grace's disappearance, despite hard and long-term investigation, had not yielded significant results. After some years, the case was becoming an almost unsolved case. However, with the culprit's provocation, the full story of the incident was revealed. One day in 1933, an anonymous letter arrived to the Birds, and the following terrible story was written there.
Dear Mrs. Bird, in 1894, I heard this story through a friend of mine, John Davis, who was a sailor on a ship. At the time, a severe famine in China led to boys and girls under the age of 12 being sold as food to support their families, priced at over $100 a pound. John stayed there for a long time to eat delicious human meat, but when he returned to New York, he kidnapped 2 boys, 7 and 11-year-old, and locked them naked in a small room. He beat the boys for hours every day for the tender meat. John has told me countless times how delicious human meat. On that fateful Sunday, June 3rd, 1928, we had lunch at your house. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me, and then I decided to eat her. And after getting your permission, instead of taking Grace to the birthday party, I took her to the empty house in Westchester I had seen before. I asked the child to wait outside the house, and I climbed the stairs and took off all of my clothes for fear of getting her blood on me. And then I hid my body, with only my face out of the window, and told Grace to come into the house. The child came inside the house, saw me naked, and ran away crying, but I grabbed the child, and Grace said that she would tell her mother everything. As I undressed her, she kicked, scratched, and bit me. I strangled that child and then chopped her up. It took 9 days to eat all of her meat. I would have done it if I wanted to, but I did not rape Grace. Fortunately, the child died virgin.
Officer in charge William King tracked down the sender of the diabolical letter and found Albert Fish, an old man staying at an inn. Albert suddenly brandished a razor, but King stopped it and brought the old man to his investigation headquarters. Police recalled a similar incident that occurred a year before Grace's disappearance and found out it was Albert Fish's crime. The mother of the victim, Dennis Gaffney, visited Fish in Sing Sing prison, where he detailed the committed shocking acts to the poor young boy. He dragged Gaffney to a building in the Ricker Street, bound his hand and foot, and gagged him with pieces of rags. Then, he burned all the Gaffney's clothes and destroyed the other evidence. Albert Fish beat that boy to death with a special tool he had made, then mutilated him until he died. He threw away the part of the mutilated corpses and took some home and cooked them in various ways over 4 days. Prior to his arrest, Albert Fish had a criminal record for embezzling public money when he was a young man, and after 2 years when he killed Grace, he was imprisoned in a mental hospital for sending an obscene letter to a woman in an advertisement for a maid. Albert Fish also took care of his own children alone after being left by his wife, but it is unclear whether he felt sadistic desires for his own children as well. At first, he targeted young children with intellectual disabilities or black skin. Although the victims were terribly victimized, investigations were not conducted properly because they were socially alienated. Because of that, Albert Fish became more and more daring and widened the targets of his attack, and Billy and Grace were the children who were sacrificed like that reason. Albert Fish, a pedophile, bisexual, carnivalist, and sadistic and masochistic serial killer, had many conditions to become a psychopath. These include genetic predisposition, environmental influences, Fish's constant efforts to indulge in more brutal and stimulating sexual satisfaction, and the decline of brain function due to aging. Albert Fish was born into a poor family and grew up with several siblings. He had several mentally ill and brain-defective relatives on both his father's and mother's sides. Albert Fish, who experienced the death of his brothers at childhood, is placed in a shelter because of the poverty. The shelter's teachers often stripped and beat the children, and each time Fish got an erection and was teased by his friends. Returning to the family, Fish became friends with a boy who worked at the telegraph office at the age of 12, from whom he learned the pleasures of eating pee and poop. Fish, who moved to New York at 20, according to his words, he became a male prostitute and raped young boys, which continued even after when he married a woman and had 6 children. He once tried to castrate a boy who was intellectually handicapped, and often entered a brothel and enjoyed being flogged and beaten. He also had a hobby of self-abuse, sticking needles into his body and hitting himself with a paddle to get sexual pleasure. Albert Fish have suffered from more severe hallucinations than usual after his wife left the house because of her husband's strange taste. It's not clear, but it's believed that Fish first killed a child when he was 49 years old. He abducted, harassed, and killed black boys and intellectually handicapped children. Albert Fish claims he killed over 100 children, but this appears to be an exaggeration. The jury accepted the prosecution's argument that he was not mentally ill and sentenced him to death. They recounted that Fish was obviously not normal, but they couldn't keep him alive in custodial care, so they accepted the assertion that he was not mentally ill. Even after it was decided that he would be executed in the electric chair, he was excited that such a punishment would give him extreme pleasure.
Sitting in the electric chair will be the greatest thrill of my life.